Welcome to the Butterfly Effect again. I'm Chris Horner. This is stage 8 of Dauphine. Today's stage got monster climbs, Col de Colombière. They have it rated at just under 6% and about 12 kilometers long. But I've had training camps in this region. It is much longer of a climb than just 12 kilometers. Now, it's not crazy steep, but it is still very hard. And with that climb really being more like 25K, when you talk about going from the very bottom, we're going to see some devastation going up the Col de Colombière. When the cameras come on for today's stage, we see a group of about 15, 16 riders up the road, and they have about a 1 minute and 45 second gap on the peloton behind, being led by Jumbo-Visma. Now, Chris Harper's doing a great job on the front, but you see the peloton is pretty wide, so they're going pretty casual back there. But when we go back up to the front group of about 15, they look pretty casual up there too. So I don't know exactly what's happening when the camera comes on, but this is a short stage, 140 kilometers just under, so we're talking about 85 miles. Now, they had a hard day yesterday, and this is a mountainous stage today that started off with a really steep climb from kilometer zero. So at this point in time, I don't know exactly when this group of 15 broke away, but I assume it had to be pretty late on the stage, with the time gap still being at just around 2 minutes. That group of 15 looking kind of casual, to my surprise, when you look at the group closer, because there's 3 Trek Segafredo riders in there, there's 2 from Ineos, and there's 2 from FDJ. So, in my mind, when I'm sitting there on the couch, I'm thinking, well, there's only one Movistar rider in there, Gorka Izagirre, so there shouldn't be too many games being played in today's stage 8, and those teams with multiple numbers should be on the front trying to gain as much possible time as they can on Jumbo-Visma behind, being led by Chris Harper. Because at this point in time, for the next 5 kilometers, really the time gap's not changing much, and there's only one rider from Jumbo-Visma riding the front back there in the peloton. Now, all of a sudden, we get on the Col de Colombière proper, like I told you, 12 kilometers long, just under 6%, and all of a sudden, it's going to be FDJ hopping on the front. It's Bruno Arame that's on the front. He's got his teammate Michael Storer, who's a climber. He's won multiple stages in the Vuelta a España last season. So, FDJ got their objective set in front of them right now, is to try to win stage 8 here at Dauphine. Now, Bruno is up on the front. He is drilling it hard. We're seeing that group of 15 just shatter in pieces, and riders are left behind left and right. Up front in that group, there's only 6 guys left for Bruno Arame, but his teammate Michael Storer is there. Eddie Dunbar's there. Yesterday's show, man, Kenny Elizon is there from Trek Segafredo. George Bennett's there. Frank Bonamar from B&B Hotels. He made it up to that front group. And so with that group being 6 guys right now, with FDJ on the front driving it 100%, now that time gap back to the peloton starting to grow, and they're getting up over 2 minutes, 10 seconds. Now, when we go back to the peloton, it's DSM that's on the front starting to pull. Now, this is what always happens on the last stage of a week-long stage race, or even a Tour de France, Grand Tour, whatever you want to call it. If it's a stage race and a team hasn't won anything throughout the week, we don't know what's possible. Any tactic is possible on the last stage, and I'm not going to argue right now with DSM going on the front, even though their chances of winning today's stage is slim to none. But they haven't won anything yet. This is the last stage. At this point in time, that group of 15 that now just became 6, nobody up there's a threat. Best guy, I believe, somewhere further north of 5 minutes back on general classification. So if DSM doesn't get on the front, who will? And this stage could be gone to those 6 leaders up front being led by Bruno from FDJ. Now behind, we start seeing some turn of events here, because Jumbo-Visma take over from DSM, because that time gap is still going up to that group of 6 being led by Bruno Arame from FDJ. With Jumbo-Visma hopping on the front, we know now the plan for Jumbo-Visma. Yesterday when we went to bed after stage 7, I brought it up that we didn't know exactly how strong of a team Jumbo-Visma had, and whether or not if they were going to go all in on a stage like today. Now we know the question to that answer, because Chris Harper back there is putting on a display of form. He is pushing hard. He's got the peloton strung out. Riders are coming out the back. The original group of 15 up front are starting to get caught from Chris Harper. I made a little bit earlier here in the Butterfly Effect, I made a little bit of a joke with Chris Harper being the one guy in this group of 7 from Jumbo-Visma not capable of making the Tour de France. I still don't believe he'll make the Tour de France, but any other team he'd make the Tour de France. and he's probably reserve after today's stage of how good he rode throughout this whole week at Dauphine. I believe he's got to be considered as a reserve rider for Jumbo-Visma because Chris Harper has been fabulous throughout this week. Now he does a stellar job on the front, starts stabilizing that time to the group up front that have now become 5 because Frank Bonamar from B&B Hotels drops out of the front group with 5 up front. It's still FDJ driving as hard as they can. Behind, we're going to see some action because Ethan Hayter is coming out the back. The Ineos rider is suffering for the efforts that he put into yesterday's stage 7 here at Dauphine. And up front, as soon as the cameras go up front, it's Wout van Aert sitting second wheel in the peloton, being led by Jumbo-Visma on the front. Tis Benoot, who took over from Chris Harper, is setting a stellar pace on the front. When they get near the top, it's going to be Bruno that falls off the pace from FDJ. Now there's only 4 riders on the front. They're working somewhat together, but not fabulous. And now 2 more riders from the original group of 15 find their way back up. And it's in the form of Ineos Laplus that goes straight to the front and starts working. And Jan Hertz, Intermarché, he latches up to that front group. And now we got 6 guys going over the KOM, being led by Deplus. But just before we go over the KOM, let me point something out. Here we go. We see Bennett looking over and smiling to Kenny Elizon. He's got to be saying, hey, Kenny, how do you like being in this group with no Movistar riders? It's got to be a different feeling than yesterday's stage 7 for certain. When they go over the top of the KOM on the front, Ineos Deplus, Lawrence Deplus that is, he's driving it down the descent as hard as he can. Back in the peloton, when we're talking Jumbo-Visma, it was Tis Benoot that did the last section of the Col de Colombière. Now we get to the KOM. It's Wout van Aert, the Belgium rider, #1 rider in the world for one-day racing. He does just about everything. He's on the front driving down the descent, and we see it's an Ineos battle between Lawrence Deplus and Wout van Aert back there as the time gap is nearing about 1 minute 10 seconds. Lawrence Deplus will pull most of the descent, if not 100% of it, and behind Wout van Aert's doing the same. When they hit the valley roads, it's the same scenario as we saw going down the descent. It's the battle against Lawrence Deplus and Wout van Aert battling against each other to see who can do the most damage and bring either this break back or extend this break out for a shot at win here at stage 8. Now the last climb is coming up fast. It's 11.5 kilometers long. Plateau de Solaison, and with those 2 groups fighting each other, basically they're going even. Lawrence Deplus up front for Ineos is holding off Wout van Aert. Problem is that breakaway needs more of a gap if they want to hold off the Jumbo train behind. Just about 2 kilometers before the climb, there's a little rise, and that's when we start seeing the peloton, if you want to call it that. There's only about 45 riders left back there. There's a big push to fight for the front of the peloton here to start this last climb between Wout van Aert and every other team up there. But Wout van Aert's going to win when the Col de Solaison starts proper. And up front in the breakaway, it starts to blow apart as 3 riders break off from George Bennett and Kenny Elizon, who doesn't have the legs left here on the last stage of Dauphine. Now, rightfully so, he put in a marvelous job in yesterday's stage 7. But there's 3 riders riding away, and it's Eddie Dunbar on the front, Jan Hertz, Intermarché there, Michael Storer, FDJ, whose teammate did some marvelous work up the Col de Colombière. He's still there, and then Jan Hertz puts in acceleration. The Intermarché rider has got a gap on the 2 companions behind. They're getting dropped now. Eddie Dunbar can't bring it back. Michael Storer is still there, and he'll start to drop Eddie Dunbar later in this climb. Jan Hertz up front. He's pushing hard on the pedal, trying to win here on the Plateau de Solaison. Now, this climb is steep. It's got 14% sections, and the Intermarché riders having problems. When we look back at the peloton, after Wout van Aert started the climb here for Jumbo-Visma, he pulls off. We see an interview come on the screen, and it's by Primoz Roglic. He says the most important thing here, of course, is training and fitness. But he has no stress about anything on today's stage, and why would you when you got a team like Jumbo-Visma riding the front and Jonas Vingegaard as your second in command here for Jumbo-Visma. As the climb takes on proper, it's Tis Benoot from Jumbo-Visma that takes over from Wout van Aert. He pulls for about 1 kilometer, doesn't do big damage to the time up front of Jan Hertz from Intermarché. But 1 kilometer later, after Tis Benoot started pulling, it's Steven Kruijswijk getting on the front. Now, this is the real dilemma right here for Jumbo-Visma. Can Steven Kruijswijk close this gap up to the favorites? We saw yesterday, stage 7. He was solid. He stayed there till about 3.5 kilometers to go on the finish of yesterday's stage. but he wasn't on the front. He didn't do marvelous work. I said yesterday that I believe he's a Tour de France contender, though, to make it on the Jumbo-Visma squad. And now today we're going to see if the question gets answered, because remember, there's only one rider up front, Jan Hurst, couple riders chasing in between with the Storer from FDJ, Dunbar who's dropping quick. George Bennett is staying in the fight even though he got dropped early. He's still trying to find his way back up. But Steven Kruijswijk, the big question here for Jumbo-Visma. Remember, he is the glue between the guys who worked early and their two big favorites, Jonas Vingegaard and Primoz Roglic. If you don't have Steven Kruijswijk at this point in time, and remember, we still got about 9 kilometers to go on today's stage, if Steven Kruijswijk isn't any good, would you really want to risk putting Jonas Vingegaard on the front for Primoz Roglic and having a catastrophic nightmare failure here on the last stage 8 of Dauphine? Now, we don't know the answer at this point in time, but guess what? You don't have to know that answer, because Steven Kruijswijk, he is on the pedals, destroying the peloton back there. As we see the group of favorites, it's Davide Gaudu, FDJ. He's coming out the back. Up front, it was Michael Storer who's getting dropped from Jan Hurst. And now in the back of the peloton, FDJ is not having any kind of positive day here on the last stage of Dauphine, as Davide Gaudu, who won a stage earlier here at Dauphine, is dropping out of the top 10 on the general classification. Steven Kruijswijk, we see him get on the radio. Got to be his director back there in the car telling him, yo, Stevie, everybody is dropping. Keep accelerating. You are blowing this field up. You were solid throughout here at Dauphine, but now you are marvelous as we're watching all the favorites coming out the back. Next, the drop's going to be the American Brandon McNulty. Tobias Johannesson drops soon after him. And then still up front is Steven Kruijswijk. Every time he catches one of the original breakaway riders that were up early here on stage 8, as he's catching one of them, he's dropping a favorite from the GC bunch out the back of the group. Steven Kruijswijk is looking exceptional, beyond exceptional, as he's blowing this Dauphine field up to pieces on this last climb, Plateau de Solaison. He is doing an exceptional job. Now it's 14%, and we're watching Steven Kruijswijk. He's starting to bring back all the favorites, because up front, while they were going up this climb, it was Storer and George Bennett that caught back up to Jan Hurst, whose legs started to blow. George Bennett went solo. Now, like I said, Steven Kruijswijk has blown through everybody but George Bennett. As the climb keeps getting steeper and narrower, Steven Kruijswijk is looking exceptional. Now, about 6 kilometers to go, we're going to see the dangerous mark. If you were sitting on the couch watching today's show, here is the point of where we start seeing the real action come into play, because Steven Kruijswijk did all the damage already for Jumbo-Visma. Now, with about 6 kilometers to go, the group is down to just Jumbo-Visma, Ben O'Connor, Chavez, and of course, Jack Haig is still hanging on. Now, like I said, about 6 kilometers ago, we're going to see Jonas Vingegaard turn his head over. He's going to look right there at his race leader, Primoz Roglic. I know what's being said right here. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. Jonas Vingegaard's looking at Primoz Roglic. He's going to say, are you ready? Do you have the legs? Are you ready to blow this up? They look at each other. Then all of a sudden, Jonas Vingegaard slots right behind his man, Steven Kruijswijk. The pace starts to accelerate, and we see Chavez and Jack Haig coming out the back. Ben O'Connor's locked on solid. He's doing everything he can to protect his general classification. Let me remind you guys, he's sitting 3rd on the general classification when today's last stage started. Up front, Steven Kruijswijk's throwing down every bit of effort he's got left here on today's stage 8. And then we see it. Jumbo-Visma, they want the stage win. Jonas Vingegaard throws in a big acceleration. Primoz Roglic follows directly. Ben O'Connor's trying to follow, and then about a few hundred meters later, Ben O'Connor will come out the back. Jonas Vingegaard will look back at his teammate Primoz Roglic, race leader, number 2 best rider in the world. They're giving each other the nod. Jonas Vingegaard keeps accelerating on the pedals. Ben O'Connor back there suffering to try to hold the gap. Then when the cameras go back to Steven Kruijswijk, he's smiling, giving the thumbs up. You got it, Stevie. You know you're making the Tour de France for 2022 with a ride like today. Up front, Jonas Vingegaard's going solid again. Primoz Roglic will start helping out with about 3.5 kilometers to go on today's stage. Those two riders will go all the way to the finish to win today's stage, with Jonas Vingegaard taking first, Primoz Roglic second, with both arms raised. The two riders looking fabulous for Jumbo-Visma here before the Tour de France starts proper in just a few weeks. Now behind, Ben O'Connor did a great job. salvage his podium on today's stage. He said earlier in his interview on the stage that he wanted to protect his GC lead here. Jumbo-Visma are just too strong that he believed to be able to put in attack on today's last and final climb of Dauphine. I got to agree with him 100%. And I love interviews that are done like this, when you're speaking the facts and the truth and you're just saying what is exactly on your mind. Some people go, oh man, you got to be more aggressive. You got to have faith. But the facts are Jumbo-Visma looked fabulous throughout this Dauphine, and I would have given the same interview that Ben O'Connor did. Now, coming back behind after Ben O'Connor will be Chavez from EF Education, and his teammate will finish just behind his wheel, Rubens Guerrero, to round out the top 5 here on stage 8. Afterwards, the interviews were great. Primož Roglič said, hey, I'm here to train to get ready for the Tour de France. Jonas Vingegaard said today's plan was to blow the field up. Jonas Vingegaard, that's what you did, and you had some great help from Steven Kruijswijk. Wout van Aert, who put in a great show. Mathieu Benoot did a great job pulling up. Col de Colombière, and Chris Harper was solid today. I didn't get to see the beginning of the race, so I don't know exactly what Christophe Laporte did, but you know it had to be impressive work. So you'll see him at the Tour de France for certain. Now, other guys giving the interviews after the stage, it's Ben O'Connor again that says he's just absolutely happy to finish 3rd on today's stage. When they interviewed Jack Haig from Bahrain Victorious, Jack Haig says right now at this point in time, Jumbo-Visma have to be the big favorite for the Tour de France. I don't know if I agree with you, Jack Haig, but one thing's for certain. Primož Roglič, Jonas Vingegaard are ready for the Tour de France to start. Once you add in that extra 2 more weeks that Primož Roglič needs to get really sharp. Tadej Pogačar still got to be my #1 favorite though, because throughout both season, he looks just untouchable at any point in moment. But Jack Haig, I will give you this. With 2 Jumbo-Visma riders, if they can make it through the first week of the Tour de France and get past that safely, they'll have numbers to finally be able to attack 1-2 at a time on Tadej Pogačar. So you might be right, Jack Haig, but at this point in time, I'm still going with the smaller of the Slovenians, the younger, stronger rider, Tadej Pogačar, for the Tour de France favorites. Now, the KOM winner, Pierre Rolland, who just dominated the KOM points here at Dauphine, will wrap that up. The youth jersey will go to the Uno X rider, Tobias Johannesson. And guess what? Wout van Aert, of course, he's in green. Team classification, there is no disputing that, went to Jumbo-Visma. This week of racing was fantastic, and we know now that Primož Roglič, Jonas Vingegaard are sharp and will just sharpen up their form here in these next couple weeks of training before the Tour de France proper. Now, Tour of Swiss is starting, so I got to let go because I got other bike races to watch. I'll see you guys on the next edition of The Butterfly Effect. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon.